thicker forest.
And it's gone. It's very, very obvious there's change happening.
Is it too late to fix this?
No, we have an amazing capacity to do things extraordinarily quickly.
So instead of cutting down rainforests, you've got this?
Yeah, exactly.
Who says you can't have your cake and eat it?
Climate Change, Addy on the Frontline. Sunday at 8 on BBC Two and iPlayer.
Time for the BBC News at 10 on BBC One Northern Ireland now with Hugh Edwards and Declan Harvey.
Tonight at 10, the safety of the AstraZeneca vaccine for young adults comes under the spotlight. From now on, because of a possible link between the vaccine and blood clots, adults under 30 will be offered an alternative as a precaution.
This is a course change. It is based on a clinical preference, based on newly emerging data. It will be kept under very careful review.
The official regulator says there's no proof that the vaccine causes clots. The Prime Minister is urging people to come forward to get their jabs.
These vaccines are safe. They've saved many thousands of lives, and people should come forward to get their jabs, and we'll make sure that they get the right jabs.
But the EU's medicines regulator says that unusual blood clots should be listed as a very rare side effect of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Also tonight, in Brazil, for the first time, the authorities have recorded more than 4,000 COVID-related deaths in just 24 hours. A body found in Epping Forest in Essex has been formally identified as that of Richard Okorogheye, a 19-year-old who disappeared just over 2 weeks ago. A team of scientists says it's discovered strong evidence of a new force of nature, which could transform our understanding of physics.
Cancelo will get the goal, he's around the goalkeeper and he walks it in.
And in Seville tonight, Chelsea take the lead after the first leg of their Champions League quarter-final.
In Northern Ireland tonight, a bus has been hijacked and set on fire during trouble which has been in both Loyalist and Nationalist areas of West Belfast. Police have also been attacked. The Prime Minister has said it's deeply concerning.
Good evening. The safety of the AstraZeneca vaccine for young adults has been in the spotlight today. The UK's leading health experts have issued new guidance following evidence that in extremely rare cases, people who've had the vaccine have gone on to develop blood clots. The official regulator, the MHRA, said the guidance was not proof that the vaccine had caused the clots, but it said the link was getting firmer. So from now on, people aged between 18 and 29 will be offered an alternative to the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, but those who've already had their first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine should go ahead and get the second dose. Now, pregnant women and people with certain blood disorders should consult their doctor for some more advice. And the medical regulator has insisted that the benefits of taking the AstraZeneca vaccine still far outweigh the risks for the vast majority of people. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, looks at the factors behind today's changes.
Turn up, get your jab.
So that's your vaccine done?
The message remains the same, but in future, for the first time, the COVID vaccine you receive will depend on your age. That's because evidence is emerging of a link between the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and very rare blood clots. The UK regulator, the MHRA, said up to the end of March there had been 79 cases of rare clots with low platelets following a first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. 19 people have died. That's out of 20 million who received the jab. That's one rare clot in every 250,000 vaccinations.
These monitoring systems are now detecting a potential side effect of the COVID-19 vaccine AstraZeneca in an extremely small number of people. The evidence is firming up. The balance of benefits and known risks of the vaccine is still very favourable for the vast majority of people.
Very few adults under 30 have died from COVID, so that changes the risk-benefit balance from getting a vaccine. It's thought younger adults are at higher risk from clots after the AstraZeneca jab, about 1 in every 100,000 doses. So they'll be offered a different vaccine when their time comes. Are you worried that this change of course might damage vaccine confidence, especially in the young?
These are really carefully considered decisions, and it remains vitally important that people who are called back for their second dose come for it, and it remains vitally important that all adults in the UK come forward for vaccination when they are offered it.
There was no vaccine hesitancy in Birmingham among those who were getting the AstraZeneca jab.
I think the positives outweigh the negatives. So for me, it wasn't really a question of whether I was going to have it or not.
Well, you can get blood clots anytime. It doesn't have to be the vaccine. I'm not bothered at all. I'm very pleased I've had the second one.
The European Medicines Agency has come to the same conclusion. There is a possible link between the AstraZeneca vaccine and very rare blood clots, mostly in women under 60. Several EU countries had already restricted the AstraZeneca vaccine to older adults, France to those over 55, Germany to those over 60. Scientists who analyse risk say this change of course should not put people off getting a vaccine.
This vaccine is extraordinarily effective. It would be tragic if this led to distrust of this vaccine, even worse if it was for vaccines in general for COVID, because it has been shown to be amazingly effective. It saved thousands of lives already.
Both Conservatives and Labour urged people to get vaccinated. The Prime Minister believes the lifting of restrictions shouldn't be disrupted.
I don't see any reason at this stage at all to think we need to deviate from the roadmap, and we're also very secure about our supply.
It's thought COVID vaccines have already prevented 6,000 deaths in the UK, and they remain the key to ending lockdown and returning life to something like normal. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, ever since those first reports suggesting a possible link between blood clots and the AstraZeneca vaccine, there have been questions about what it means for the entire UK vaccine programme and indeed people's confidence in it. Our health editor Hugh Pym explains the potential problems and the effect that they've had so far.
Lockdown is easing, the vaccination programme's going well, but today there's been a change of course, raising new questions. First, what is the risk with Oxford AstraZeneca? It's lower the older you are, as the potential for serious illness with COVID is weighed against possible harms from blood clots. Some medication, including the contraceptive pill, also has a very small blood clot risk. Anyone who's had a first jab and 4 days or more later gets severe headaches, blurred vision, or certain other symptoms should contact a medical professional.
The question today comes from
A committee of Europe's regulator known as PRAC drew this conclusion.
We know that the benefits of the AstraZeneca vaccine have been established. It prevents COVID disease, it prevents hospitalization, and it prevents mortality. So in that respect, PRAC feels that the overall benefits outweigh the risks.
So will it delay the vaccine rollout? Today, a new jab was delivered for the first time in Wales and Scotland, made by the US company Moderna. It's set to be offered elsewhere in the UK from next week.
Well done. Thank you. Great.
Health officials say even with under 30s given a choice of alternatives, they're still on course to offer all adults a first dose by the end of July, so the roadmap should stay the same, although it does depend on the supplies currently promised. Of the vaccines currently in use, the government ordered 100 million doses from Oxford AstraZeneca, though the rollout will slow down this month because of supply issues. From Pfizer-BioNTech, it was 40 million, and from Moderna, 17 million doses, though only a limited amount will come through this month. 2 more vaccines are being assessed by the regulator, the MHRA, Novavax, where there are 60 million doses on order, and Janssen, 30 million doses. Trials are ongoing with other vaccines where the government has made preliminary orders. So will confidence in the Oxford AZ vaccine be affected? People in younger age groups we spoke to had varying opinions.
I'm a bit concerned to hear it because I'm 24 and I've already had my first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine and I have my second dose booked in for a couple of weeks.
It's one of the very rare cases that it might happen, but it probably won't. The risk is probably worth the risk, right?
I'm still all for it. I mean, I'm going to do a little bit more research now into it, but I still think at this point I would get the AstraZeneca vaccine.
It remains to be seen how people react to today's announcement, though one leading official made the point that the chance of getting a blood clot through having COVID-19 was much higher than with the AZ vaccine. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
We'll talk a little more about the AstraZeneca vaccine in just a few moments. Before that, let's look at the latest official coronavirus figures. 2,763 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means that on average, the number of new cases reported per day in the last week is 3,072. Across the UK, an average of 3,536 people were in hospital with coronavirus over the 7 days to the 1st of April. 45 deaths were reported, people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. On average, in the past week, 31 deaths were announced every day. The total number of deaths so far across the UK is 126,927. On vaccinations, the programme goes on, as we know, and in the last 24-hour period, 85,227 people have had their first dose, taking the overall number of people who have had the first jab to 31,707,594, and the people who've had their second dose in the vaccine in the latest 24-hour period, 186,793, taking the overall number of people who've had their second jab to more than 5.6 million people. So now that we've seen all of those figures, let's turn to Fergus Walsh, our medical editor. These new guidelines today, Fergus, I think what viewers would like maybe is a bit of useful context around those.
Hugh, I think this is one of those cases where the headline is genuinely scarier than the detail of the story. The risk here is very small indeed. We're going to need more research to find out why the AstraZeneca vaccine appears to be triggering these very rare blood clots and why 2/3 of them are in women. Now, if we look at the highest risk age group, it's people in their 20s, there's a 1 in 100,000 chance of getting one of these very rare blood clots after an AstraZeneca vaccination. Now, put that in context, for that same age group, the risk of dying in a road accident is also 1 in 100,000 every 3 months. And I don't know many 20-year-olds who would avoid getting in a car. Even so, that age group will now be offered an alternative, probably the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, which don't trigger these rare blood clots. Interesting that many EU countries are still limiting the AstraZeneca vaccine to much older age groups. But this review shows the safety surveillance system is robust. The danger is it could damage vaccine confidence, but that will be tragic because they are a huge scientific success story, vaccines, which is what will lead us out of this pandemic.
Fergus, again, thanks very much. Fergus Walsh there with his analysis, our medical editor. Well, let's look at the effects of the pandemic then in Brazil, because the authorities there have for the first time recorded more than 4,000 COVID-related deaths in 24 hours, as a more contagious variant of the virus drives a new surge in cases. Hospitals are overcrowded, the health system is on the brink of collapse in many areas, and more than 330,000 people have died with COVID in Brazil so far, and that is a number exceeded only by the United States. Our science editor, David Schuckman, has more details.
Even at night, the graveyards in Brazil are busy. So huge are the losses from COVID. And although the rate of deaths, given the size of the population, is not quite as bad as in the UK or Italy, things are getting much worse. At most hospitals, the beds are full, and people know that it's not even worth trying to get one.
We are dealing with the lack of supplies and lack of beds, intensive care beds. So we are in the full capacity, and in any moment we will have this collapse.
It's the president, Jair Bolsonaro, who's getting the blame. Right from the start, he's played down the virus, and he keeps blocking local authorities from taking any action. So the disease is now out of control. And the big worry is a new variant known as P1, which has now spread fast. The result is this depressing picture of the rapid rise in the number of coronavirus deaths in Brazil, with more than 4,000 in the last 24 hours. Behind much of this is that P1 variant, which, compared to others, is more transmissible and seems to affect more younger people, though it is thought that the vaccines should still be effective against it. In any event, the variant has spread to most of South America, including Uruguay, Peru and Bolivia, which has just closed its border with Brazil, and it's got further. British Columbia is dealing with hundreds of cases, and there are far smaller numbers as far afield as Japan, Turkey, the UK and many other countries.
This nuclear reaction out of control, like is the way I define Brazil right now, is a biological Fukushima. We are basically generating variants that can spread not only throughout Brazil and South America, but can spread throughout the planet.
And although vaccines are being given in Brazil, they've reached only 8% of people. And that matters, even to countries that have done far better.
If we continue to vaccinate only certain people in certain countries while allowing the virus to continue to spread unchecked in other parts of the world, then new variants will emerge in these parts of the world against which our current vaccines and treatments may no longer work. We're not in that position just now, but it's the future.
The fear is that when Brazil or any country fails to bring infections down, the more chances there are for the virus to mutate. So the vaccine producers are already having to think ahead. David Shukman, BBC News.
Let's turn now to some of the day's other main stories. Metropolitan Police have said that a body found in a lake in Essex has been formally identified as Richard Okorogheye. The 19-year-old student went missing from his home in West London over a fortnight ago. Let's join our correspondent Tim Muffet at New Scotland Yard with the latest.
Yes, Hugh, apart from some CCTV footage taken in Essex the day after he'd left his home in West London, there had been no sightings of the missing 19-year-old student. Now, 2 days ago, police searching a lake in Epping Forest said that a body had been found, and this evening, the Metropolitan Police have confirmed that the body is that of Richard Okorogheye. They said that the death is being treated as unexplained, but officers do not believe there was any third-party involvement at this stage. They say a post-mortem examination has taken place and found no evidence of physical trauma or assault, and that the cause of death is pending whilst other investigations are carried out. They say their deepest sympathies go out to Richard's family at this incredibly difficult time. Now, his mother had spoken about the fact that he had struggled during lockdown. He had sickle cell disease. He had left his home without his medication, and this evening the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, said her thoughts and prayers are with his family, who are mourning someone they describe as a gentle giant who was loved by everyone. Hugh.
Tim, many thanks for the latest there at New Scotland Yard. Tim Muffet, our correspondent. Now, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, said this evening he was deeply concerned by further scenes of violence in Northern Ireland. Crowds in a unionist area of Belfast have set a hijacked bus on fire and attacked police with stones. The devolved assembly at Stormont is set to be recalled tomorrow morning for an emergency debate following several days of violence. Now, last night we reported on the financial effects of the pandemic on many families, but other effects are more difficult to measure. After more than a year of lockdowns and social distancing, the impact on people's well-being, especially on their mental health, has been severe. Some 3.7 million people class themselves as lonely. That's over 1 million more than last year. The report also found that the areas with large numbers of young people or unemployment or high-density housing tend to be the most affected. Our correspondent Elaine Dunkley reports now from Manchester.
Opened during the pandemic, the Feel Good Club couldn't come at a more needed time.
Somewhere over here, when we're all laid back out again, is where our big talk table's going to go. It will be a signal to other people that you're here, open to chatting to new people and meeting new friends.
Kira and her wife Amy hope when their coffee house is fully reopened, it will feel like a home for those affected by loneliness and isolation.
I think what the pandemic has taught us is that actually being open about those feelings and talking about them help. The small moments where you meet friends and offload, I think that has become very apparent to people that that those things that we kind of took for granted pre-pandemic are actually so important.
People in busy towns and cities are often the loneliest, according to today's report by the Office for National Statistics. A greater concentration of young people and high unemployment rates are major factors. 16 to 24-year-olds were 4 times more likely to say they'd recently felt lonely compared to the over 75s.
Lonely young people turn into lonely adults, and if we don't talk about these things, it becomes something that has a massive stigma around it.
16-year-old Elom is a young carer and often feels isolated. Claire has also experienced loneliness.
I feel like the minute you say, oh, this person's a young person, oh, they're always on their phone, oh, they're talking to their friends, they're always connected. Yes, I have my phone, or maybe I text my friends. That doesn't mean I am not lonely.
Lockdowns, isolation and social distancing has intensified the public health issue of loneliness. Jed usually DJs in care homes, but has been unable to because of the pandemic. Through the charity Manchester Cares, he's been able to connect with different age groups struggling with loneliness.
Many people don't even have a computer, the older people, so I've been lucky enough to have a laptop and join in with activities. The older people welcome listening to the younger person's point of view, and in opposite way, the younger people like listening to the older people's tales, of things gone by and in the past, what we used to do.
Little space for people to come.
For some people, lockdown has been the first experience of loneliness. For others, it's been a long-term problem. For those wanting to break the stigma, highlighting the issue offers hope. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News in Manchester.
A man has won a High Court case against the betting firm Betfred after it refused to pay a £1.7 million jackpot that he'd won in an online casino. Andy Green won the prize in January 2018 while playing a game on his mobile phone. The bookmaker refused to pay out, claiming an error meant that the game was not operating properly. The judgment means that Mr. Green will, after a 3-year battle, receive his payout plus interest. Foreign and Development Office has once again suspended UK aid funding for Oxfam after new allegations of misconduct were levelled against staff working for the charity. 2 members of staff were suspended last week following allegations of bullying and sexual misconduct in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The charity had only been allowed to start reapplying for UK cash in March after a 3-year ban following a cover-up of sexual exploitation by staff in Haiti in 2018. Myanmar's ambassador to the UK has been removed from his post by the country's military attaché in London. Chow Swa Min was told that he was no longer the representative of Myanmar and locked out of the embassy. All staff were asked to leave. The police were called to stop them re-entering the embassy. Let's join our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams, who's at the embassy in central London. Paul, what's been going on?
Yeah, Hugh, the ambassador is still here. He's sitting in his car just along the way here. He's tried a couple of times to enter the embassy this evening without success. He says he's been locked out by the military attaché and that, in effect, the military has taken over the embassy. Now, the ambassador has been critical of the Burmese, the Myanmar military in the last few weeks. Not nearly as critical as Myanmar's ambassador to the UN, who back in February called on the international community to defeat the coup. But the ambassador here has urged the release of the elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi, and he has called on the military to exercise restraint. He says he's trying to occupy a kind of middle ground, but that effort, it seems, has failed. And there's something of a standoff. The police are here, they've kept activists away. The ambassador says he's been in touch with the Foreign Office, and for their part, the Foreign Office says they are seeking clarification on the current status of Myanmar's ambassador in London, in line with diplomatic protocol.
Paul, many thanks again. Paul Adams, our diplomatic correspondent there at that Myanmar embassy in London. Now, an international team of scientists working on a project in the United States say that they have discovered strong evidence for the existence of a new force of nature.